Hello everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 15 of season 4. How is everybody doing? I'm a bit frazzled over here. There's a lot happening at the same time. I was doing a little project to help out a friend, and then I forgot to set all this stuff up for the stream as far as graphics and the URL and everything. And then I was giving my brother notes right before lunch on a plugin. There's like everything converged, and then there's jackhammering happening just outside this window. So hopefully I got everything working perfectly, but you never know. Let's see. How is everybody doing? It seems to be streaming on YouTube, but nobody is there yet. We got some people on Twitch. How is everybody doing? I hope you're having a lovely day. I see Dean set me up with a question right away, which I appreciate. And Candy Trashfire also has one. And there's somebody on YouTube. Thanks for jumping in. Anyway, why don't we jump right on in and answer some questions? Why not? Switch over the screen and let's try the one from Dean because he popped in quick with it. Mute. Ooh, look at this. All right. This is from... illegal, maybe? Illegal. So they're art, maths, loop, generative art. So they definitely, they are, oh, interesting. Okay, I see a little bit of what's going on here. Let's see, 2 replies. Blender and Houdini, and somebody saying, I wonder if C4D is capable. So let's see if we can answer that question. Okay, what can we observe? Okay, first of all, I believe that each one of these is circling the circle. I think it's just this vertical line is traveling the circle. So that's step 1. And then we have this essentially box shape, which is getting deformed by the circle, by those poles that are aiming upward. And then you've kind of got this crazy subdivided grid that's in there, but the grid isn't doing anything special. It's just deforming, so it's just a subdivided grid. So those are our main elements. So with that in mind, there's a lot of different parts here. I mean, different elements of the question could be relevant, like getting those circles to travel and deform is a bit I'm interested in here. Making that subdivided grid is not trivial. I still have that old grid maker that I made, and we were planning on turning that into a plugin, but it was on the list, but we haven't gotten to it yet. Which essentially would exactly do that. Like, I really like my old grid maker. I'm trying to think of any manual way I would go about doing that. It's not easy. I'm trying to think if there would be a kind of a semi-parametric way to do that with a Voronoi fracture. But it wouldn't subdivide, I think, the way I would want it to. Here's kind of a little separate experiment I'm going to do, but I think I know what the limitations are going to be. So it could give us some nice random subdivisions, but they're going to be very much all perfectly lined up, which is not what I would want it to do, but it might be as far as we go for the grid element of this. So I'm going to start real simple. Why don't we even, what do we do? Let's go 500 and feed this cube into a Voronoi fracture, and you see we get all this random kind of crystalline structure. But if we go to the sources and say we don't want this random source, and instead we make a matrix object, my favorite way of doing this, we can make a grid of however many we want across. And how would I want to do this? Let's do it. Should we do a pure random? I'm kind of feeling like we should do a pure random. I'll say linear of 0, and let's do, I don't know, 12. Let's go easy on the first one. 6 subdivisions, and create a random And the random will randomly position them all, which is great, but I only want them to go out on X. Now we know we want to go out about 500. I don't know if 500 will actually push out 500 or possibly double the amount. It does look like it goes up to double the amount, so we'll cut that to half of our 500. And now we, in theory, have a couple of matrix objects all perfectly in a line. So that's the point. All of these are on the X axis perfectly. So if we feed that matrix in as a source, we're going to get some random stripes, because the idea here, you know, with the fracture, as always, the idea is it's creating a subdivision. Let's turn it on. We should be able to visualize it pretty well. It is creating a subdivision saying what cube is any given place closest to. And it's always going to be a straight line. So essentially, it's finding the halfway point between that and that, which is right here. And it's finding the halfway point between this, and that's right there. As long as they're all perfectly lined up, those lines will also be in alignment. So that's the idea. So we can make a few extra here, get some different subdivisions. You see this just, you know, working pretty straightforwardly. Having done that, let's see if we can essentially duplicate the rig and feed it into a second Voronoi. And this time, we'll make matrix 1, matrix 2, and this will be fracture 1, fracture 2, and random, and I'll duplicate the random here just to keep it a little bit organized. And this time we'll put in the second random for that one, and instead of randomly pushing out on X, let's randomly push out on Z and do a different seed. So a different distribution. And now, can we do another singular cut? So this time, instead of the source being matrix 1, it will be matrix 2. So now you can see that I've created a randomized grid by doing essentially two cuts, two series of cuts. And I mean, I do like this distribution. It looks cool. Now we could keep on nesting and nesting and nesting and potentially getting more detail. I'll do one of those, but you'll see where this technique would, I mean, this is cool. I like this. And, you know, we could increase the count here and you're going to get like more crazy subdivisions. So, you know, definitely fun opportunities here. And I hadn't specifically ever thought of this particular technique. If we were to grab both fractures, I believe, and maybe do a little bit of offset fragments. Yeah, we can get some spacing between. It looks cool. Like, I mean, it's a cool layout. You get cool random colorizing of everything. So I like it. And we're even getting the colors carrying through, which I didn't know was going to be a thing. If we decrease the count of both of those, here's a thought if you wanted to start pushing it further. So actually, we'd probably even go pretty light on it. So you get very few subdivisions. And let's see, how would I go about doing this? We would have to duplicate several things. So the thought here is we've got this fracture, and I will create a plane and a plane effector. Don't affect position. Yes, affect scale in a uniform absolute way to -1, and everything will disappear. And now under fields, create a random field, and the random field, let's say it's pure randomness. You can see, you know, they're up and they're down. It's anywhere between 0 and 1. By creating a quantize modifier layer, we can say there's only 2 steps. So essentially, we've taken this random field and said anything above 50 is 100%, anything below 50 is 0%. So it's kind of like on or off. Cool. So that's worked pretty much exactly how we'd expect it to. So that becomes like a pair. So we could, you know, potentially group that up. And then copy paste. Oops, that was not what I meant to do. Copy paste. And on the second one, I wanted the exact same field. I mean, potentially, well, I'll just keep this. Do I want to keep the duplicate? Yeah, it's a plane. So we've got the quantize. All I need to do is take the result of this and invert it. So now we get the opposite. So now I've built this into 2 different rigs. So now that it's 2 different rigs, the idea would be we need another. I guess I'll copy that and that. Copy and paste. So now we've got kind of this paired up fracture 3, matrix 3. So, you know, independent matrix and fracture. So now, moving this down to the bottom, if I were to say, I don't know, well, this is actually 2A now, and this will be 2B. So if we take 2A and fracture it, That should go into the fracture. The sources is matrix 3. So here's matrix 3. Now we change the random seed on its cut. And now effectors. That has a plane. Delete the plane. Okay, sorry. I had the when I copy pasted it, it had the plane effector in there. I know there's extra steps here that maybe are getting confusing. Let me hide 2B, and now we only see 2A. So here's what 2A looks like. So now I'm taking half of our stuff, and I'm saying, okay, only half of it, let's subdivide that again. So you can see how half of it's been affected in this new way. And based on that, we could add a couple of extra subdivisions, and we could change the random seed on that and get slightly different layouts, but you can see how we've got extra cuts there. Now, if I bring back the other half of it, which is 2B, you can see that that is now not as subdivided. So if that is the concept, we could copy, we could say that this is actually 3B, and, or I'm sorry, this would actually be 3A, and this is 3A. Now I'm going to take both those, copy paste, move that down, and now this will become 3B and 3B. Now 3B here will not get 2A, it will get 2B. And now that is being fed something else new. And in this case, how about we say that this matrix B will again go in a vertical orientation. So now you can see we've got some that go vertical and some that go horizontal. So you can see the concept here. Obviously, this is going to be slow, and it's a very tedious process to do this. Meanwhile, the plugin concept I have would be doing this very quickly. But what's cool is that, it's set up, it's parametric, like I can make, additional changes. You can see there'll be more subdivisions. In the way that we took like half of them and chopped them and half of them to the other thing, it'd be nice to like do it 4 times instead of 2, and then we could do this multiple times and keep doing more and more cuts. The point being is you can see we've got some subdivided shapes here. Now, technically, I think it would probably be a good idea if these were all very subdivided. And there's not a... I guess we could... There's no dynamic way of subdividing them so they all end up kind of even the way we built this. I'm thinking about... That wouldn't... Well, maybe it would. Maybe we can just go to those original cubes, which are still just living in here. We just got 2 original cubes. And if I subdivide this to, let's say, 22 by 22, I think that those will filter up through the system, right? So yeah, now we got these. There's a decent subdivision here. So that worked better than I thought it would. So I'm going to have a few extra subdivisions here. And, each of those becomes a reasonably subdivided grid. And because of the next step we're about to do, we will need it to have those subdivisions. Okay, so let's save this. Scene file. I don't even know what to call it. Warping grid. So, working well so far. Okay, now, step 2 would be we need a deforming rig. And I've got one idea of how I might do it. Let's look at the reference again real quick. So, very cool, very strange. The lines never... I guess they do get straight. Yeah, they get straight when they're in alignment. That's interesting. Because we can definitely warp it. I'm just trying to think of how I would get this inner curve and outer curve. There would have to be an orientation. And it's so smooth between the two. That's my worry. Because we could do the trivial version of this pretty easily. But to get these nice curves, which I feel is a pretty fun part of it, how would I do the curves? Because they're shrinking in. Like, I know how to make these circles rotate around. And we could deform a low poly approximation of the shape. It's these nice curves that are throwing me off. I'm thinking that if we made... How do I explain this? If... Open a new file. So if I were to make this rectangle editable, and let's make these be soft, so I could say soft interpolation, which essentially turns into a sphere. But now, imagine that, how do I do that? I can never remember how to break there. I broke the tangent. So now, if we were to make these, if we break these tangents and aim them exactly at each other, you know, essentially we can get a cube again, or a square. You see we end up with, I'm approximating, but you see we can get a square shape. And even though it looks like a square, technically these are tangents, so we have curves. So I should be able to take this and curve it. You see how we get this curvature? And that was my thought, that if we build this type of shape, we could then move these around and potentially rotate them, and we'll get these nice shapes. And maybe that will just work, because what my worry is imagine that this rotates and the other one's rotated. So you get this, you know, potentially get this really nice curve, but then when they suddenly get really close together, you see how these will pinch and overlap. So at that point, there's also like this scaling happening between them. And I can think of like really advanced rigs that could do approximations of that. But that would be a lot of steps that I don't feel like would be super justified for the amount of time they would take. But maybe, I guess it would still take some time. But maybe it wouldn't be too bad. All right, let's figure some stuff out. So, new rectangle. We know that our other shape is 500, and let's make it this from the spline. Now we're going to do some tricks where instead of still thinking that I'm overcomplicating it with the process I'm going to do. I bet you there's a more elegant way, but I don't know. If I change the spline type to a B-spline, and the adaptive doesn't really matter, what ends up happening is we're going to get this really curvy line, and it's really smooth in those curves, which is pretty cool. Now, before we go to make it a curve, what I would like to do is subdivide this. Subdivide, and then subdivide again. So subdivided twice, which means it gives us some extra points, which is exactly the count I want. Selecting these 4 points, I want them to be a certain space apart, and that space will be, currently it's 250. We want it to be really close to, you know, how sharp do we want that corner? I think we want it pretty dang sharp, so I'm going to say that these are 499. Okay, so now those 2 points have gone almost all the way to the corner, and now I'm going to grab these points, and I'm going to say that they are, again, 499, but this time on Y. So now they are almost all the way up in the corner. And now, I think that this is the case. If I change this to a B-spline, then you see how these became really sharp, and I should be able to even delete this midpoint, or this corner point. I guess maybe we need the corner point. I don't want to worry about the corner point, because every point here is going to make everything take longer to calculate. So I'm going to call that good enough. So I'll go to each corner and delete our one little point. Okay, so now we got 2 points in each corner, taking what's essentially a very smooth spline and turning it into a very sharp spline. And what's hopefully will work here is if I grab this midpoint, you can see I can pull this down or out, and we get like we get a nice curve from that. So essentially we have 2 points that we need to move identically. So now we need a mechanism for moving those. What's the best way to do that? I think it might just be espresso. Which is very manual, but honestly, I can't think of a specifically better way. So we need a null, and the null I'll snap up to there, and this will be y plus and x plus. And we go into the rectangle, and I will say that this is point number, structure isn't turned on. Let me see if, no, that won't give us the index. So we need to go to window, structure. This is point 11 and point 0. So 1 or 0 and 11, very important. So via Espresso, this is going to be very meticulous. I really wish I could think of a more elegant way of doing it. So we need programming tag, Espresso. This rectangle, we need to output the object, and we need to get the points. So here are the points. So that is the object, and then we can, there's an extra setting here, which is point position. So now we need to feed a point index. And how do I feed it more than one? Oh, do we have to do an iteration? That's going to be rough. So we can say iteration, and I can say, oh yeah, we can't even do that because it'd be 1 and 0. Well, I'm just going to make it more manual. That already super deformed everything. Okay, so point 0 needs to be at a position, and the position will be wherever x, yx is. So now we say coordinates, global position, and say that is where that point should be. So that point should be stuck there. We also know that point 11 should go there. So it also needs the object, and now it needs another point position, which is the same one again. So now, when I move this null, you see those 2 points will move with it. Can I rig this? Joint spline potentially would make point snap to it, but I'm not sure that the links would be correct. And we've already gone this far, so let's continue. So let's do the mechanical ones we need. I need the structure menu again, which is here on the other screen. Okay, so point 9 and point 8. So we need another null, and this null will be down at 500. This is now y minus. So we can duplicate. This will now be 0.8 and 0.9 from this object. And they now go to that null. There we go. So that's the second one done. And we'll duplicate both of those. Hold down Shift, snap that 500 units over. This is now y plus and x minus, and this is now y minus and x minus. You can see that, once you build one, you can start duplicating things and make the process go relatively quickly. So we'll duplicate those again and replace the null, This upper left null, we need to see what points those are. Boop. 2 and 3. 2 and 3. Object. Points 5 and 6. Yeah, 5 and 6. So 0.5 and 6. Object. Okay. Could we have closed the spline? I think I just suddenly had an idea that would make this easier. Somebody's saying I typed the wrong number in one of these. Let me double check. Oop, yep. Thank you. That would be messing us up. Although, I think I have a better idea here. So anyway, you see what, I've now manually rigged those, and I'd have to manually rig 4 more to get the controls. But you see how I get a nice curve here? And then even here, it's not very, you can see that you get some segmenting here, but you can just go into your spline and change this to like 1%. So now, if the curve is sharper than 1%, we get a nice smoothing. Anyway, here's the new idea. I'll save this just because, maybe I'm wrong and we will want to go back here. This will be B_bits. Go away rectangle. And now I will make 2 children of that one. 2 children of that one. 2 children of that one. 2 children of this one. And then we need some midpoints. So we need to do it in the correct order. Visually, let's make a rectangle so I can see where things are supposed to be. Okay, so this is the top right. So our first one will be over here, 250 over. So we'll just call this one right. And then next is the bottom one, which is correct. So this, wait, we need to go in order. So that's top, right, bottom, and now this becomes, we go down 250. Let's go minus 250 and 0. Okay, so now you see I'm at the midpoint there, and then we'll call that one bottom, and then we'll make the next one, and this, yeah, I thought these might be out of order. So now we swap these two, because I want to go in a circle around it. So now this is the bottom left, and now this one comes after that one. So that goes to 0, and then 250 over. Excellent. And now this one is named left, right, bottom. That goes there. And now this one becomes the top, and we can move this one up to 50. Okay, cool. So now we get rid of the rectangle, and if this works, I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, and you see I'm selecting these. Well, they live in order. Okay, now I can make a tracer, and the tracer should have all those things I had selected automatically fed in the order that they exist in the object manager. And then I can say connect all elements, and then close the spline, set that to a B-spline, adaptive 1%. Actually, we probably don't want it to be adaptive. I'll just say natural 8 should be fine. Okay, so now just by placing nulls, I should have, yeah, I've now made essentially that exact same rig. So the tracer is doing all the connecting for us, and we just had to have things in order. And because I made 2 nulls in the exact same spot, there are 2 points still in this exact spot. So, we get that little curved corner, but whatever, this was a lot quicker. So anyway, you saw 2 different approaches there. One got to be a little bit quicker and more controllable. Now, can we use this spline to actually deform the thing? Should have thought of that, about that first. Let's hope yes. Let's find out. Save. Let's go 3-dimensional. And actually, what shape can we feed in? Will the loft work for us? Because what we need, caps, quads. Yeah, see, that is not a good shape for our deformation. We really need a grid. Is there some sort of spline wrap? I never used those, but maybe there is. I can't articulate it too well because we got a couple extra subdivisions in here. Okay, you see I just got a spline in there, or a piece of geometry, but can we make that spline deform this plane is my question. And there's the spline and the spline rail, and I've never been super clear on their function. Every once in a while I've played with them, but never with a huge level of confidence. So let's see what happens. Okay, original spline, modifying spline. That's got potential. So let's make a copy of the tracer and then make it editable so it's stuck in that state. So we'll say that that's the original. This will be the modifying spline. B-spline approximation, use length, full polygons. Maybe, maybe not. So let's grab a control. That didn't change anything. Does anybody have a awareness of the way that should behave? Because that is not quite working the way I hoped it would. Rig joint for deformation. I had kind of been thinking that, but maybe you're right. Maybe now that we have a good-looking spline, maybe that would work. So, yeah, let's try that. Yeah, that's a good idea. So, we have a tracer. I want a joint chain. So let's see if the exact joints count will work, and then we can add additional ones if we need to. So, what am I doing? Character convert to joints. So now we should have a the tracer. Maybe it needs to be editable. Make that editable and convert to joints. It's not making a very good stack of joints. Maybe we need to subdivide it some more. US. We'll subdivide a few times. Can that character convert selection to joints, spline to joints? I think I clicked the wrong one before, but now you can see that is actually, you can see how it's subdividing based on the number of joints I made. I don't know if we need to make one last one. We can adapt to it if we need be. Turn that off. Joint chain, rigging, IK spline. The end point of the spline will be the final joint. And the spline will be, we can't deform what we need it to be. Oh, maybe we can. Put it on the tracer. Oh, it doesn't let me drag a parametric spline in. We need it to be a parametric spline, I think. Dang it. I feel like moving knowledge, yeah, we could deform it with an FFD, but we have to drive the FFD somehow. And then if we go and try and deform the FFD, we'd be back to manually linking all the points via Espresso again. I'm trying to think of a more clever way around that. But we are getting trapped in some surprising ways. I don't even know if these splines would deform exactly the way I want them to. I mean, we've got a couple of individual fun techniques here, but how do we start to combine them and move from one to the next? Because ultimately I was going to use a mesh deformer to deform our other geometry, but we need, essentially, we need this grid to deform the way we move that spline. Another thought had been, I'll open a new file. Another thought had been, we've got the rarely used Bezier grid type, where there's a bunch of subdivisions but very few grid points. So you see how I could take this and move these around and you get these really nice curves. Like this would work really well for us, but again, we'd be back in that world of Espresso, linking these points, I believe. Yeah, that would be the case. I mean, and you see this gives us like perfect curves, like exactly the curves I want to, but how could we control those? How indeed. This is a really cool shape if you have never used it. You can get some like gorgeous curves out of it. But I almost only ever use it if I'm making something like a leaf. Some sort of leaf is a nice way of using that. Definitely. No. People are throwing out some suggestions, and I appreciate it. None of those are what none of those are going to work the way I want them to. And I don't want to link this, but it would only be 9 points. We could do it relatively quickly. I really like that tracer technique, but I forgot that we weren't going to be able to derive a consistent grid from it. I can't think of a better way than with this grid, unfortunately. You know, strange is there's no scale parameters here. It just kind of is what it is. As neat as this idea was, that I think is a dead end. So I'll save that. Again, I'll save this as another bits file, because now we can open up the one that I was like, well, we might need it, so I'm going to open up the Espresso one again. Oh, wait. Did I save over it? Maybe I did. And there's not enough undo states. Dang it, I thought I was being all clever. And I must have saved over the file as I went. So we got to do the Espresso from scratch again. We want that. What do we want? File, revert to saved. I want this, and that. Copy. And paste. And delete, delete. Delete, delete. And delete, delete. And delete, delete. Okay. Okay. Programming Espresso. This will output the object. We need to get the points of the object. That is the object. This is the point index. And we need to, where is this? Top right. We gotta be careful. We just accidentally pulled, because of the index here, it automatically pulled it. We probably can't even undo, so that's something to keep in mind. Temporarily pull that off, make a new Bezier to do this clean and meticulously. Break the connection. Brand new Bezier plane. Top right window structure. That is 0.8. So now I can say, okay, 0.8, you will go to the global position of that from this object. And we should... Oh, and that object will be the Bezier. It didn't move... Oh, that's point index. 0.8 should go to point position. Boop. Okay, so that did work. You see that suddenly jumped. That's what we want. So now we select the next point, which is 0.5. So we duplicate that. 0.5 should go to the right from that object. And then we move on to Y. 2.2 from object will go to position. And this is now 0.1. And you see how meticulous this is. 0.1 will go to bottom from that object. 0.0 will go to x minus y minus from the object. 0.3 will go from the left. Point 6 will go from y plus x minus. And lastly, the top, which is 0.7, we'll go to that one. Okay, so now those are all linked to the nulls, and it's an actual grid of geometry. I don't think we have to worry about this middle point, although, well, now I think about it, this entire thing should be lying flat on its side. I don't think that's a problem. I'll save this as the next file. Am I able to take all of these and spin them? Yes, I am. And then I want each of these individually to have the proper rotation. Can I do that individually? Maybe. Axis. We have to do it here. Probably worth it. I'll wish I did this if I don't do it now. Okay, so now we've got all the controls. I've got a null with a bunch of nulls. Okay, now the relatively straightforward part is we got those corner ones that will travel in the corners. But then we might need to modify the rig heavily so that these middle points will be traveling towards the middle, depending on certain other variables. We'll get there when we get there. So let's copy this into our grid scene file. Group. The final shapes are actually these two Voronois, which I think I can just make a connect. Put those both inside and turn off weld. There we go. So now those should just be geometry now, and they're well subdivided geometry. Paste in everything from the other scene file. That's fine. Can put the connect into a null. Fractures. Save. Can we deform? Can we mesh deform? I hope this works. Can we mesh deform from a flat shape? The shape will be the Bezier. And very important because this is flat. I'm going to look at the surface area as a way of converting the points. And now can I initialize? Seems to have translated over. Controls, right. Hey, look at that. So at least that part worked exactly as we were hoping it would. So now, hiding these matrices. Now you can see I can grab this control and go and warp and deform the entire thing very nicely. And this entire thing is pretty dang parametric. We haven't made anything editable. Okay, now we need to have these shapes travel around in whatever shape we want. A lot of that becomes, they did it in a very meticulous way before where they're each offset perfectly. I'm honestly not that concerned with having them lay out so perfectly. So I'm going to heavily subdivide an end side, put it into a cloner, do an array. We'll do, we'll set it to radial. And we want to count to 4. And from the top view, make these large enough so they're laying out pretty nicely. I'll make that editable. That's just a quick way of making 4 different circles placed exactly the way I wanted them to be. So that becomes DE save. Now we do I want to do it directly on here? I kind of feel like I don't. I also don't want to lose these positions. I could zero them out, but I'm gonna put that into a null, 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 null. Okay, each of those went into their own group, and the reason I did that is if I accidentally mess up the position, I can always say reset transform. It's gonna jump back. I know we could freeze the position, but I like having them in this absolute way. Okay, so if that is the case, I feel more confident in simply adding a line to spline. And I wonder if this would probably be a little bit better if all of these were rotated 45 degrees. Yeah. So this one obviously wants to be on this circle. So I'll copy the name over. That will go onto this one. And now, yeah, we're getting a pretty nice curve. So should we do these kind of uniformly? Control D. I guess the other ones had a really finely tuned curve. I'm just going to set to linear for now. We can change it later. At the beginning, position 0. At the end, position 100. And then we can make it 1 frame shorter, but we'll do that a little bit later. But anyway, that should just circle around 1 time. And you can see we get a nice kind of warping, traveling thing going, working just fine. So next up would be this one, and that should pair with this one. I'm just going to get the names right away. This one, which should pair with that one, and this one, which should pair with this one. Cool. So now all I have to do is drag this tag over, and now here it wants y minus x plus, so I'll find y minus x plus, boop, and that's why I named them. I copy it again, y minus y, or minus minus, minus minus, and plus minus, plus minus. Okay, so now if we hit play here, they're going to be doing their little warpy thing, which is already kind of interesting. So the main thing to make them the main thing would be making these all offset from each other a little bit. Is that what I want to do? I mean, do we care there? I mean, a question for the audience. Like, we're spending a lot of meticulous time on here. You see all the techniques. It just turns into a very mechanical process from here. You can see all the elements kind of at play. We've got the curves. Like, do we want to keep on going on this like until we get to kind of a final, or should it be like, okay, we've kind of got the techniques, we're good? The last thing I will do, just because mechanically speaking it would be kind of neat, is we did all these in order. So if I wanted these points to have like a really nice curve to them, my thought would be this bottom point, which used to be at the midpoint between here and here, is no longer staying there. It's staying static. So one thing I could do immediately is say, okay, this bottom point, I will say it should have a constraint tag, and that constraint tag will calculate one frame, well, not one frame, one calculation, one priority later. And I'll say it'll be based off the transform of what? Well, I'm going to say I want it to be based on wherever this one is, and I want it to be based on add wherever the one after it is. And by putting 2 of them, they're both weighted at 100, they fight over it, which means it ends up being at 50%. I told it to calculate after because you see the tag will actually calculate before it. So that's why I told it to calculate after. But now you can see this midpoint, when I hit play, is going to be staying directly at the halfway point between each of those. So now there's control for where that should be. So we can do this again, go to this right one and say that it's halfway between the above one and the below one. And again, the left halfway up from the above one and the below one. And finally, this one. Which should be at the halfway point between the above one and the below one, which would circle all the way back to the top and grab that one. So now we get the midpoint. So I don't know for sure, but well, we should end up with, oh, I guess I did one of them wrong. Which one did I do wrong? Where are you? I feel like you're the problem. Oh, you're the problem because I put the wrong tag. Whoops. How did I even do that? The above and below. There we go. Maybe. I still see a curve. Oh, okay. Anyway, now you see we just get this kind of rotating curve or this rotating cube traveling at the halfway points. So, you know, kind of interesting there. Also, this tag, this espresso tag needs to calculate after all of those. So I'll set the expression up to 2. So that should, I think, be a perfect square, just going to different scales as it goes through. So obviously not super interesting there. You know, we were just getting some straightforward rotation. But offsetting all of them would be... offsetting them in time would change the shape. But the additional element I would like to do is... what's the best way to do it? So those are all traveling around. What I would like would be to have these midpoints travel towards the middle depending on the distance between their respective points. So here's how I will do that. Okay, yeah, here's how I'll do that. That is the master one. That's what's getting controlled. So I'm actually going to put this into the right. Oh, I'm going to go group, 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 group on the top, bottom, left, right. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm going to copy the name and paste it above. Copy above, and copy above. Okay. Then move the tag up a level. Essentially nothing has changed, right? So, but this is the actual null that's been fed through the espresso. So, what I want is this one's living on top of its parent, and I want it to morph from its parent's position to 0, essentially. So should we do that with a little bit of espresso? I mean, there's multiple ways we can do it. I think we'd end up using some espresso no matter what. But so let's do espresso on this. So espresso. So what would be happening? Well, I've got this null, and it's living where its parent is. That's fine. So if we take... I'm going to put a 2 on these. I do need to distinguish between them. And once these are espresso nodes, it's going to be hard to read. So you now see that here's the original position. And here's where it actively is. And I want to morph between... And how do we... Well, I want the global position of this to be halfway... I guess it's a mix. Yeah, we'll use a mix. That makes sense. So we've got the global position from its parent. We've got its own global position. And then we could get 0, 0, 0 as the middle. That just makes sense. There's a node called a mix node. And there's our mixing factor, which is a really important thing. So I'm going to say, here's a... Well, first of all, we have to say that this is a vector. So now we're taking this global position, which is wherever it is, and then we're saying a global position of 0, 0, 0, and we're setting that onto the right, on this right null. So if I select this right null, you can see it's all the way over at the midpoint. Oh, and we should probably have this calculate at 1. Yeah, 1 is fine. Anyway, if I increase this mix, do you see how it goes from the original null to 0? Boom, bump, bump, bump. Exactly what I wanted it to do. So we're mixing between those two positions. What is going to drive that? Well, I'm thinking that it is driven by the distance from its two parents, or the two things to its side. So we can grab the original, well, the one above, the one below, and we need to output their global positions. global position, and we search for a distance node, and this will now tell us the distance between these, and the distance between them, boop, boop. And what we could do is do an actual mathematical calculation. If I'm doing something kind of just quick and artistic, what I often do, it's a little bit silly, but we'll just make a text spline. I'll drag the text spline in here, and then we'll output this as the text. I think it's text spline. Yeah. So you can see, so now what I want to do is find the frame where they're furthest apart, which is going to be right here. So 600, essentially 700. They're 700 apart here. And now let's find the point where they're closest together, which is going to be right there. 133-ish. Yeah. So 700 and 133. So let's make a good old range mapper. And we now have two. Oh, here's the number coming in. And we know that that number is going to get as small as 133, and it's going to get as large as 700. So when it's 133, I want it to output 0. And when it's all the way up at 700, I want to output 1. And so now we're going from 0 to 100%. This mixing factor wants 0 to 100%. So let's drag that into the mixing factor. And let's see what that does. So now that should be automatically driving that for us. Looks like it's backwards currently, not a big deal. With it being backwards, all we have to do is go into the range mapper and flip these around. So I can say it actually goes from not 0 to 1, but 1 to 0. So now you can see when it's all big and stretched out that it's doing its thing. And now we can say it shrinks in there. And so like when it pinches in, it squishes. Now, I think in the original thing, it might have actually been bulging outward as well, depending on the way the curve went. I'm just not going to worry about that. But anyway, this espresso rig is working well enough, pretty much doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So we need to copy it 4 times onto everything and feed it the appropriate inputs. So here's a copy of it. This will be controlling the bottom 2 coming from the bottom, range mapping from the thing above to the thing below. And that should, with any luck, just be working. Do this again on the left. Double click to make sure I go into the new one, because visually they look identical. Driving this one. Parent is that one. What is above? What is below? And one last time. Copy that over. Double click to go inside it. Drive this. Parent is that. Above. And loop around below. Okay. Does that look correct? Yeah, they're all identical again, so I think that translated well. Delete that one spline. We don't need it. So now all of those are doing the curve as it goes around. All of the animation here is driven just by 4 align to spline tags. So now I think, as far as I'm going to go with this, is we just have to offset those in time. So let's open up our timeline. The best bet's probably selecting all of these. What's the best way to do this, actually? Yes, probably. That's weird. If I drag up through there, it is inconsistently selecting them. But anyway, I want to say that this is going to loop or repeat. I think loop. So a loop before and... yeah, we'll just loop after. And if we say repetition 0, it means it loops forever. So they should each get 1/4 of the time. 90 isn't very divisible by... what is that? I'm not sure what I'm looking at there. What is that? Let's extend our timeline and make sure that they're still looping. Yeah, it's looping. Okay, that's fine. 90 is not very divisible, so I was going to say let's put this up to 120 because that's more easily divisible, or even just 100. So now I can grab the next one and come on. Let's offset these by 25. grab 2 more, offset those by another 25, and grab the last one and offset it by the remaining 25. So now each one is offset by 25 frames with any luck. It looks like it doesn't, these aren't pre-rolling, which is fine, I guess. So I just want to rewind the first one before before 0, so they're properly looping. All right, it starts at 0 anyway. Something doesn't feel right there, does it? They're all... Oh, maybe? Interesting. This might make sense. These are all probably rotated. Yeah, you see they all have their own unique rotation because they were spun, so I'm going to set those all to be the same. Okay. That's funky. Obviously, there's more variables here that I'm specifically taking into account. I don't... Let me think. Yeah, they're probably each naturally offset by 25%. I don't know. I'm hitting the end of my interest in this particular one. Let me hit undo. So those are all synced up again. When these were not offset from each other, they were all at the equivalent space having been rotated. Yeah, I would think that offsetting each of them... I guess there... yeah. The other animation that we watched, there was a very definitive curve to them, and that could be the key difference here. The... like I said, I want to move on to a different one. But... the other ones had a very specific speed that they were traveling. So if we make this a curve, I don't even know how I'd want to lay it out, but if we get some curvature going on them, then it's going to be really slow at some points and really fast at others. Now, right now they're all identical, so they're all going to identically move out and in. And I just put an arbitrary curve on there, so this is super arbitrary. But again, if we took these and offset them by their varying amounts. Keep in mind it has to get to the initial one. That's a little closer. Definitely we don't have the bulge going outward, which was really giving it a lot of volume. So right now we just did the simple push in, where we could be forcing it out to double the distance when they're stretched, which I think would make it look better. But essentially, I mean, every concept is here. We're just not combining them properly. But I feel like there's a dozen different places where this could have been more elegant. And, you know, so there's a definitive lack of elegance here. And a few other details, just to break it down, is we've got this nice grid and it's subdividing well, and it's even deforming nicely. And it could depend on the angle, maybe if I'm looking at it more vertically. But as these squish down, these lines will squish in really tightly. So these lines actually get thinner. And I don't know for sure, but I feel like in the reference... Oh, no, I guess they do squish down. I thought that maybe they maintain an even distribution. They're not, which is, you know, fine. The theirs each had different heights, so it'd be pretty easy to make these each have their own height. Because of the original parametric shape. Yeah, that'll be the last thing I do. So if you wanted this to be... I guess it's all super deformed, and our... I guess... Yeah, we're not... I didn't set it up so we can revert very easily. This mesh has to be at a kind of at a T-pose type of thing. Like, you know, the equivalent of a T-pose on this. And we've now deformed these points irreparably. So, I mean, I guess I did make the 0 point, so technically I could do it. But I'd have to turn off all these tags. I don't want to do that. But anyway, I don't want to manually do it, but just to show... Or I'm not going to propagate it through the rig, but... just to show you the last thought I was having. if you did want all these to be a different height, let's get rid of that mesh deformer. Right now they're all the exact same height, but we can go back into these original fractures and you see we just have a cube and a cube. But if we delete that cube and a cube and instead feed in a plane and duplicate the plane, you'll see that we'll get the exact same pattern. And here I will even not subdivide. We'll get the exact same pattern, but like two-dimensionally instead of it being a volume. And now that we've got these two-dimensional shapes, it gets fed through a fracture, which of course bakes it all down. And we could randomly extrude them several different ways, but an immediate one that jumps to mind would be using a capsule node where you grab an extrude, and we can now drop that inside here. You see that they extrude, but right now, well, actually they are individual polygons, so that's pretty much all we need to do. We say create cap, and I could say offset variation, and then we get different heights on them all. And obviously that's going to look a little bit more dynamic and have a little bit more space. They also could have gotten rounded. They could get pre-rounded, potentially. Can you pre-round here? Let's grab a bevel or a chamfer. And does the chamfer work? It is point mode. Tiny chamfer. Okay, yeah, that does work. So you can see, but we'd have to be careful. Let's limit it, but we get it here. But any small sliver, and there's nothing preventing that from being a large one. We could subdivide. Oh, that's the size. We can add subdivision here and get a nice curve there. And then after the curve, we can then extrude. And now all those extrude upward. And each has their own height and their own nice curve. But interestingly, we could change the order of this. And we could say, actually, first extrude, and then chamfer the edges. And now you see we get something very different. Where now, instead of just the outlines being curved, now everything gets rounded out. And you end up with a very different shape that can have its own cool, unique look. So, yeah, neat. Good question. A lot of technical. It's one of the ones that's neat, and we explored a bunch of things, and hopefully there's a bunch of really cool techniques in there that would be, useful to everybody kind of individually. But almost every step of the way, I feel like there's a slightly more elegant solution that we could have done, where we did very manual espresso and a lot of manual rigs, where I feel like there'd probably be a more elegant way. Travis, you're right. We could have just rotated the end sides. If they could have all been uniform, instead of offsetting a time, we could have just offset them by rotating. But you saw that we eventually did change the timing curve on them, and you couldn't do that by changing the shape of the spline. Yeah, they're very eased. Yeah, slower than... Yeah, everybody's talking about that. I'm just catching up. But yeah, that was that. Lots of different details there. I'm going to see if there is anybody over in YouTube asking questions. Welcome, Zach, Nicholas, Sean, Farzad. Haven't seen you in a while. Taylor, Badger, Ollie's, Voids. Lots more people. How's it going? Let's see. Voids. Any ideas on how to get the new cloth to inflate certain spots of an object based on fields or fall-offs? It depends. You're saying you've seen reference where people have done it, and you're not sure how they're doing it. Keep in mind that it kind of naturally will randomly pick certain areas to do it. And that could be construed for somebody intentionally doing it. Now, I'm not saying that they're not intentionally doing it, but keep in mind that what looks art directable might have been random. Having said that, let's see if we can do something along those lines. New simulation system. Here's a collider floor. You can't use floor objects in it. And just to make it a little more interesting, let's make it a person. Here's one of my favorite techniques I've been doing all the time, which is I want to make a blob out of this character, a nice solid air-filled mesh. So it'll get built, it will get meshed, or I'm sorry, yeah, it'll get meshed. And we need, well, here, I'm going to intentionally kind of do it badly. So in the past, I would kind of do that and be like, well, I want it to be very low poly and very even. So like maybe I'll make a inflate here and inflate it, and you see that the character kind of pops back in again. And then we end up with like, like the legs start connecting here and you start losing some detail that way. And then we do end up with these bad polygons there. But what's great now is I can say, actually, let's crank up the resolution a bunch. We probably don't even need to inflate. I will inflate a little bit. But let's get the resolution high enough that the legs don't bump into each other. And now it's way too high polygon. I wouldn't want to run the simulation on this, but of course we can throw it into the new remesh and say, give me 25% of the polygon count. So now we got all the detail to make sure the legs didn't merge together. And then we dropped it back down again and we got the low poly that we wanted with a very even polygon count throughout. It's also symmetrical, so we can turn on symmetry X, and now it should be mirrored left and right to be identical. You don't have to do that, but you'll see without it, especially down here, you see how this angle is definitely not symmetrical, and now it is. Okay, anyway, just a slightly more interesting mesh. Okay, so let's scoot it up into the air a bit, and talk about getting it to inflate. Now we'll probably have to make it editable, but add the cloth in, and the ballooning effect is one of the most important things. Well, it's going to be the main thing we're doing here. Now, how do I want to do this? Double. It's a decent resolution, but it's probably going to be pretty floppy. Like, let's just run this, and you should see it runs quickly, and the whole thing just flops down into a pile. All good. Now we could say to quickly, over the course of 5 frames, overpressure to 1, which kind of turns into like a big squishy water balloon where it's trying to maintain volume. So you can see how the head, I am entertained by this. There's a volume of air and it's trying to maintain that. And as it falls down, you see there's that moment, happens very quickly. You see there's the moment where the upper body is inflating because all the air has been pushed out of the legs and now it's coming out of the arms and the head's getting super inflated. And then the pressure of the head goes back into the arms, and then it'll probably fall backwards and you see everything kind of reinflates a little bit. Very squishy water balloon. So, pretty cool along those lines. But anyway, we want to overpressure it. So you can see we can inflate it more and we can inflate it more. And now that, it's going to be not super even because it depends on the polygon density and where things want to fall and fill. So now it's kind of like the head and the torso are filling up more. But the thought here is we could drive certain areas, and we do need to make it editable. So we'll just hide one, make this one editable, copy the tag over because the tag disappears. So now we'll have it take a little bit more time, 15 frames, to transition in. And the whole thing, all the properties are the same across everything. Now, if we say 0 bendiness, it's still pretty subdivided, so it's still going to bend a lot, right? But let's see how much we could make it be very bendy in a certain spot and not in others. So I'm going to crank up the bendiness all the way, and you can see the difference. When I hit play, that's going to like well, I guess because of all the inflation, it's not super different. So you know what? Let's not do it via bendiness. Let's do it via stretchiness. So if we give it a little bit of stretchiness, let's see if it looks any different. I don't think it's going to look too different. It looked like maybe it's stretched a little bit more. So let's go 10 times more and see what we get. And you can definitely see how it's more. It's definitely blobbier. And now let's go up to 555, which is the highest I kind of go here. And now things are super allowed to stretch. And you see that the head is so stretchy that when it inflates, it's like, well, I don't mind stretching out. So it's not even trying to force the air back into the other parts. So now it just kind of naturally did that. But we are now saying everywhere is really stretchy. So instead, let's say, well, not everywhere is stretchy. So going into point mode, or actually we can just right click and add a other vertex map, and in the vertex map tag, turn on, well, do we need fields? Actually, I might just paint. If you double click on the vertex map tag, you can just paint on a character. So, and let's say not visible only, so I can paint right through the mesh. So now you see I've painted this arm, and the arm is now 100%, and everything red is 0%. So imagine that as a multiplier. If I twirl down stretchiness, we can feed it a map, and I'm now saying anywhere that was yellow is multiplied by this number. So yellow is now 555. Red is multiplying 0, which means it's stretchy 0. So now in theory, the entire model is like, I don't want to stretch, but this arm is like, I don't mind stretching. So let's see what we get. And there we go. You can now see that that arm was like, okay, fine, this will be the stretchy part. And it worked pretty much perfectly. So you see all of the inflation is going naturally to the point that we said was allowed to be very stretchy. And now it's, I mean, it looks pretty funky. But, you know, it's now as trivial as moving into our mesh, and we can just paint anywhere we want to be inflatable. You can hold down control, by the way, and like paint different areas, so we can, you know, subtract certain spots. So now I've updated the map. I've said that those are the areas that are stretchable, and let's just see what happens. You can definitely see that it's trying to do it. This was maybe the most stretchy part, so it is naturally going over there. And potentially the map doesn't need to be, I don't know how far we have to push that. Yeah, by going slightly more reasonably, you can see that like this bit of the arm is trying to stretch. But the area, given what I just did, you can see in the first few frames, like you see right here, it's bulging out on the torso. Now the air hasn't compressed too much up to the head, but you can see the different areas I painted are definitely inflating a bit. Ultimately, the area, the largest area, is going to have the most polygons and the most points. So I guess I'm not super surprised that this area is kind of getting disproportionate amount. It's maybe a little more than I thought it would have been. But you could, you know, with this being the largest area, potentially we could say, okay, I'm going to change this from absolute to add. And let's say we're adding 10%. But if I hold down control, I'm subtracting. So you can see I can paint out the strength a little bit. Actually, it's very repetitive. So I'm just going to click a few times. You see how I've made that paler. So now maybe that's like 300% and these others are 500. Having done that, now you can see that, you know, look at just by making that a little weaker, this hand was suddenly like, hey, I'm now the weakest link, and that's what's going to inflate. So there's probably going to be some very meticulous push and pull trying to get everything exactly where you want it to be. Blurp, 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 blurp. Yeah, now, I mean, like, even there was enough to make it go on the other one. But you can see the different bulging points go over. Definitely more wiggly. Look at the head, the painted head part. You see how it was like wobble, 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 like really shooting in and out. Boing, boing, boing. So yeah, that's how I would custom inflate particular areas. Now, I am a little curious if we can make it a little bit more dynamic, but I don't think we're going to be able to. Actually, maybe we can. Maybe not. Inflate specific areas. Okay, because through my experimentation, it seems that the simulation tag is referencing the vertex map. It's referencing the vertex map in its original position. So what I want to do is, what's the best way to do this? I think I don't know if this will work, but let's add on a rigging tension tag, and I'm going to say stretch. That's going to be the stretch point, and now we fix the tension right now. So the idea is this is driving the vertex map now, and as the character stretches, it's going to add tension to it. I think that makes sense. Let's increase the power here. Order of magnitude. Yeah, a little bit weaker there. That's all good. So now what we're saying is if it stretches, it gets more powerful. But what I want is kind of the opposite. I want it, as it stretches, it actually gets weaker. So I'm going to make a copy of that tag, rename it, use fields, drag in the first field, tell it to reference the index, so it's the same number, and then invert. So now we get the opposite. So essentially now, if something stretches out, it's something like, okay, cool, I stretched out, but now I stretched out, so I want to stretch the least, is the idea. Inside of our simulation tag, I'll replace the map with vertex map 2, and I have no idea what this will do. Oh, goodness. Well, the feedback loop is definitely working. It's just a bit wacky. Okay, so not entirely what I was expecting, but we're getting a response, which is good. Okay, inside this vertex map, I think everything we're seeing there is all good. What we need to do, though, is calm it down. We might need a third tag for this, but this could be as simple as a smooth. Like, let's do a delay smooth, and this is going to just make it so that I can't transition instantly. Yeah, there we go. Look, that instantly calmed it down. Well, actually, we should look at this without it. So here's what was happening before. You see the colors are just changing and shooting all over the place. But the delay smooth is saying, okay, go ahead and do the transition, but you can't do it instantly. And now you can see how the entire thing is getting like these waves pass through it because, you know, where it's allowed to be stretchy is constantly changing. So it's actually, this is working way better than I thought it would right out of the gate. So that's pretty cool and crazy. Yeah, okay. I thought we'd have to experiment more to get that to go. I don't have a specific goal for that, but it's pretty cool. And I mean, the whole thing's dynamic, holding air. All just traveling. And it's only controlling the stretchiness, too. So, you know, always keep in mind that we might be able to drive other parameters. I don't think stretchiness in this case is going to be the most important, but like that could be changing bounciness or friction. I guess you can even change thickness. I haven't tried changing thickness. I'm not sure. I can't think of an application where I would need to change thickness, but it's cool that it's there. You also change the mass in different areas. That's not something I had specifically considered, but that's also potentially cool. Let's inflate it even more. This is so ridiculous. More frames, obviously. Need to torture him more and slow it down a little bit more. Like, as I increase this, it's going to make the transitions be slower. So now you can see... now you can see that, like, yeah, the whole thing's still happening, but it's a little more calm. And then put this way down, and it's going to be super crazy. Now it's, I don't know. It's pretty wacky. That's for sure. I like how this is based on the tension. Like, it's based on the stretching, so it's a very powerful feedback loop. You could probably get a similar effect just by feeding in like an animated noise, but this is like no, like the area that was inflated shouldn't be inflated anymore. So I like a controlled feedback loop like that. Now keep in mind, you could do, like, we could put a spring in there, but I don't know, like the spring is going to just make it kind of crazier. Like, it's going to make things overlap and shoot and echo. Potentially there's power in it, but I think smooth is the one that actually makes it controlled. If we do a lot of smoothing, it's going to... Blurp, blurp. Oh, poor guy. Poor guy. Anyway, excellent question. Thoroughly enjoyed. 10 out of 10. Inflate specific areas. Feedback loop. Okay, checking out the chat. Voids, excellent. Space Wind, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Would it be possible to make some sort of funny octopus? I mean, that might be in reference to like what we have here. Like, you could totally, you totally could. I mean, yeah, modeling out an octopus wouldn't be terribly difficult. Even doing volume type things. I have an old octopus model that I had. I don't really even feel the urge to do that. Like, I need a more specific version of the question, because, you know, I could make a cartoony octopus in like, you know, a minute. But then if something more specific, then it would take a while. But it goes, like, oftentimes we've gotten like, how do we make these the suckers on it? And it's like, well, that's an entirely different question. Slimy Guts 2.0. Yeah, Gumbo Inc. That's going way back from some of the early streams back in the day. But yeah, you could totally feed this through. Actually, that is something I would like to see. If I just swap this to a pipe type scenario, what would that look like? So, what's the best way to do it? Let's make a nice big random pipe with ricochet. Is that the best way to do it? I don't specifically need it to be that way. Still would be pretty quick though, so yeah, we'll do it. Cube. Goodbye. I just want a zigzagging spline, so I'm going to use my plugin. Ricochet. Ricochet. Tell it to be inside this box, and you see it's bouncing around inside. Like, make it way longer. You see I've got this line bouncing all over the place. For anybody who doesn't know, my favorite demo here is being like, okay, that's bouncing with a length of 10,000, and now 100,000, and now I clicked off, and now 1,000,000, and you see how many lines there are. So, like, Ricochet is really fun. But anyway, I don't need it to be too long, so we'll do this. Ricochet, spline, B-spline, natural, editable, rope. Do I want to rope it? Yeah, I do want to rope it. So, rope, radius of, I don't know, 5? No, let's do 11. I don't want to lose this tag, but I want it to not calculate. So now, frame forward. Oop, okay, that's too many. Radius of 5. Okay, that's a little bit more calm. Now, this is a deformer, but I've had a little bit of trouble. So all I want to do is have them not intersecting. So yeah, that should be enough. I think I can say current state to object. Nope, didn't work. Yeah, current state to object there kind of frustratingly doesn't work. If I put in a connect object and do a couple of frames, click, 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 click. Now it shouldn't be intersecting. Right click, current state to object. That did work. So as always, when in doubt, use a connect object. Anyway, this is now giving us a nice tangled up rope that shouldn't be really intersecting, meaning we can sweep a radius of 5. Probably good to make it a little thinner just in case there's a little intersection. So now we got this crazy, you know, going back and referencing like the guts tutorial. Some of these edges are going to be a little bit sharp, but what are you going to do? Yeah, there's going to be a few intersections there. Maybe not a problem. But anyway, I probably have to make it editable. So we'll make a copy, make it editable. Delete out all these pointless tags, copy everything over, reactivate our simulation. Tension tag at the beginning, fixed tension. So now this is what it's expecting. And all the feedback loop and everything should be just passing through this. So I just wanted to, how safe is this? Okay, it seems to be running okay. Some of these might be intersecting, but now as something deforms, it inflates. And then we should get a similar, it's already looking pretty gross, a similar feedback loop mechanism, hopefully. It's pretty subdivided. I'm not seeing too much on the way of the, I mean, there's definitely some motion, but this lump is not giving up. I do like these different areas all kind of inflated and deflated. But it's looking at Vertex Map 2. Here are the vertex maps, and it's settled down. And that's just the inversion of that. Maybe, okay, this could be that it's just deforming too much, so the power is too strong. So I'm going to weaken, yeah, I'm weakening the power a bit. So let's see if that's different. Yeah, a little deformation was going a long way with this. So let's see if a weaker one is actually able to compensate. Yeah, better. You see that? Okay, see that? Yeah, just by changing that one number, it's suddenly that one spot deflated. Now this one inflates. Now that one should be acting like, oh, I'm super inflated, so it should want to deflate. Should want to. If the other ones are, if it's too strong though, it's not super strong, but they don't fully get to red. It's trying to, the feedback loop should be fighting to inflate the other ones, but the weight of the other ones might be fighting it. But yeah, you can see some of these inflating as they inflate. This one is deflating. There, well, it went over to that spot. I think it's another obvious spot that it wants to inflate at, but it did work. Probably if we push this even further, this gives more room for it to compensate. So as we keep on increasing this amount, this tag should have like more subtlety to it. And the more areas that are red are areas that could then re-inflate. But if everything's inflated, then there's not much compensating you can do. So yeah, you see this one now deflated very quickly. And now this one is again inflating. But my hope is that one's going to deflate again even more quickly than it did before, because all of these have more space to grow. It's interesting because I think that they do want to grow, but because they're tangled up, like it almost means, well, it's like, I'm kind of trapped, so I can't. But these parts over here are less trapped, so they're inflating more. I'm just guessing, and you know, that could be very realistic. Yeah, you can see that that is red, meaning that that should be, this is like, hey, I'm not stretching at all, but it's still not able to go back. We've got to go back. Yeah, most interesting. Anyway, fun stuff. We got time for one more solid question. Travis says, when the C4D figure becomes sentient, I'm going to be the first one that comes after. And that's probably true. I'll save this file because why not? Feedback loop underscore guts. Blake is asking, do I ever transfer C4D to After Effects? And if so, in what use cases? No, essentially. I'm a behind-the-scenes Cinema 4D guy. So if somebody else... I'd be teamed up with somebody else, and they would do the After Effects. I'm just not in that type of production. Or I'm not in production where I'm doing the first part all the way through the end. So I kind of made a decision a long time ago that's like, no, I'm not going to be a like motion graphics generalist. I'm going to be a Cinema 4D generalist. Munthy's asking about the Strechnal piece. Let's see what we got. Intriguing. So he's definitely seen Strechnal stuff before. Pop, 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 pop. It is C4D. It's obviously some sort of Voronoi fracture. The double spacing is throwing me off a bit, but it might be... there's several processes that I can think of. I'm just not sure which one would be. It's something that's kind of abstract enough that there's a lot of different ways it might be tackled. Very cool, as always, from all of their stuff. Anyway, let's do the simplest thing by just making a cube, throwing it to a fracture. And something we can do, not hull only, but we could say, we could do an offset and then invert, and then you end up with this type of shape, which is similar, but there were air gaps even in this. So if you've never done this, obviously, you know, you can do some crazy stuff with fracture, Voronoi fracture, which is really cool. Anyway, you get this shape, but theirs was hollow in a different way. So let's not invert. And now we get these gaps. Now we get those air gaps, right? And then, yeah, let's put this into a connect. Don't weld. Put that into a null. I would like a polyfx, and the polyfx will transform this to 0, 0, 0. Every polygon shrinks to nothing. But then we go into the field and I say, well, I don't want to get rid of everything. So we'll say the original cube is what it's referencing. And currently it's looking at the points. But I'll say, look at the surface of it. And let's shrink, or I guess grow this to only be far enough. Is that working? Only be slightly away from the surface. Something feels off about that. Yeah. Oh, it's getting rid of... It should be the polygons. But I guess maybe they're along the surface. It's close. But it's getting rid of some of the polygons that I don't... It's getting rid of some polygons I don't want it to be getting rid of. I just wanted these outermost ones to disappear. But then maybe I'm overthinking it. The fracture... We can... Oh, yeah. I always forget about this. Let's... I want to select the outside faces. And now there's a tag. So now in the poly effects... Let's not worry about the surface. Let's just say you are based on the outside faces, based on the index. Not actually doing anything. Why not? That's a selection tag. The connect might be changing poly. That might be changing point counts. No. And not point counts, it might be changing index orders. Now, unfortunately, this is outside faces, which should be all of those polygons. We should be able to prove it via a material. Turn off colorize fragments. And yeah, now you can see it indeed is selecting only these outside faces, but yeah, you see they're shiny, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not translating into the poly effects, which this should be really straightforward mathematically talking. Like this should be looking at the index of the polygon. It should be a giant list of those, and it's not seeing it. And I can't really account for that. Like, I just feel like that should work. There are, I can think of other ways. Yeah, let's do a slightly different way. Here's the thoughts. This time, this can be put into a connect. We'll duplicate it. I think that we might, yeah, this might still work, but this cube will be a little bit bigger. T scale. So you can see it gets bigger. Although, yeah, it's making the point distribution change. So this is fine. We can do this. But let's get rid of the second one. Instead of a point distribution, we'll make another matrix. My fave matrix. Linear. 200. 0 spacing. Random distribution, please. And go out to, I don't know, 300. Okay, so we get 200 is fine. Okay, so we get that. So it's kind of like the same scatter, except I'm manually doing it. The reason I'm doing it that way is now when we feed that in as a source, you see we get a very similar looking fracture. But now when I duplicate the entire system and I make my cube bigger, it's still referencing those same ones so that you don't get that little offset that it was before. So now we get a second one that's larger. And now we take this larger one and give it a larger surface offset, let's say 10. So now it should shrink in, and you see I've got this doubled up shape, which is already a cool looking shape. And now, the risky thing, make a bool And we'll take A, subtract B, and that should take a bite out of it. And that is visually the shape that we were seeing. Yes. So that's a technique. Make the walls thinner. My worry is like animating it. Like it might be twitchy because, you know, bools are wont to be twitchy. We can animate it. They're already in their position, so I will add an additional random on top of it. And this one will be actually, yeah, we'll just make it a noise-based, indexed. Global's fine. Animation speed 22. So let's see. Yeah, that's doing a fine job. I guess it's hopefully this is generating really clean geometry. So you can see it's doing a nice job there. Now we started with a cube, but let's make it not a cube because why not? Let's keep it still kind of simple. Make a sphere, subdivided, icosahedron, and B, so we can see it. Yeah, we can go a little bit lower. Control D, simulation, CPU, zero gravity. Probably just a turbulence. Keep it simple. Simulate forces, turbulence. 25 maybe. Give it a decent amount of scale. Sphere, simulation, cloth, super bendy, pretty dang stretchy. Hit play. So now we get this thing warbling around. Larger scale, higher strength. Let's give it a little bit of inflation, just so it's not... we want it to squish, but we don't want it to like collapse in on itself, so now we get a fun blobby shape. Slow everything down, damping, global damping of, I don't know, 22. Drain the energy out from the scene so it doesn't go crazy. And yeah, it's not drifting around too much now. We could, of course, increase this. We can trap it in a particular spot by, let's do it simple. I'll just make a box, tell it to be a simulation collider, and say that it should only bounce off the back side of the walls. And we can make it invisible. And that can't go anywhere. And now this should be trapped within that box. You know, and you could hide it in different ways, but, you know, it shouldn't drift too far away. So anyway, that becomes our base shape. Are we able to make an instance of it? I guess that's an important variable here. No. That could be a problem. Can we make a connect instance of it? A little trick there. Maybe. Yes, seemingly yes. When in doubt, use a connect object. Okay, if indeed that does work. If you don't know, you can treat a connect like an instance by dropping into this object parameter, this link field, instead of dropping it as a child. So you can remote link into it, and it behaves a lot like an instance, but it is different from an instance in important ways, and maybe we're seeing one of them here. But anyway, let's drop this in as the source and drop that in as the other source, which should be pretty much identical. But everything disappeared. The bool. Oh, that makes sense. This one's not inflated, but we can do that. We can do that by... How do I want to do that? Let's search for an extrude. And we'll extrude that out as islands. Not even too much, just like 2. Just a little bit bigger. There's a perfect Boolean before, so nope, still breaking. Dang it. What's up, Bool? Why are you doing this to me? Yeah, it's happening even without the simulation. And you see it's the exact same setup. The Bool just doesn't want to cooperate. It's all there. And I think that should kind of perfectly work. It's just the bool doesn't want to help. I don't even know what to make of that. What do you do when the bool's just like, nope? I wonder if I'm over. I wonder if there's an additional setting here that I'm not properly taking into account. Like the fracture, if I say hull only, can you invert a hull only? No. If you do hull only, you can give thickness, but that's not, I want the opposite of that. It's frustrating because I don't want to do the bool at all. Bools are terrible. Bools are, I mean, they're better than I gave them credit for, but they're inconsistent and they're slow. We've got this lovely selection tag, but Cinema just doesn't want to acknowledge our selection tag. At least the PolyFX didn't. I'd love to prove that it's not. We could make it invisible, but that wouldn't give us the right thickness. And I don't think a capsule is going to be able to see it the way I want it to. If we do that and we say selection string, could I just do that? Would that, oh, it did sort of acknowledge that. That's got potential. Okay, let's do a delete. And I want to delete, not default, but this tag. Hey, look at that. The PolyFX didn't want to acknowledge it, but Neutron is. That's way simpler, if that works. So you get that. Hey, look how much better that is. I mean, that's what I was trying to do with the PolyFX, but it didn't work. But it is working with our delete capsule. So now the outside gets deleted. Super clean geometry, by the way. And now we grab the extrude again. After that, extrude, default, I'll just say all. Use islands. And let's push out only like 2. That gives us a little bit of thickness on it. And hit play. And let's see if the cloth is running. Kind of, oh, I deleted the cloth. Oh, I forgot. Okay, cloth, do your thing. Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah. Perfect. Blur, 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 blur. Okay, there we go. And that's what I wanted to do. So we've got our little blobby shape. We can get the thickness from the fracture. Or yeah, the fracture gives us the offset fragments. We delete the outer shell, give it thickness after the fact by using the selection tag, entirely parametric. And now we just get these remaining chunks. Pretty cool. Steve's asking if there's a reason to use the extrude capsule instead of the solidify. I think they end up being like identical, mathematically speaking. I don't know which one's better, but I think it's like an identical result. Let's prove it or disprove it. I'm open either way. Let's see. That would have to be 2. So put that in. I'll say thickness of 2. Selection string is already default all. So let's see. Here's what it looks like with solidify. Here's what it looks like with extrude. Looks like extrude might be backwards. So let's put it as a negative and try that. So that's one. That's the other. It does look like... okay, well, here's a solidify. And look, we're getting some funky, like, Fong issue there. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but you see it does not like that. So let's turn that off and do the extrude. And the extrude seems to be doing... I'm not even sure what's going on. There's definitely some weird geometry there. But the extrude's a little less twitchy. The extrude isn't creating caps, though, so maybe... No, even that seems less twitchy. But, you know, they probably each have their uses. But I tend to reach for the extrude. Huzzah! The I wonder. We haven't saved this. Fracture. Inverse shell, maybe. I wonder if we can do this with the original distribution source. Well, like, will that be consistent, or is it morph and move with it? No, it does. Maybe there's a setting for it, but the you see how it's like popping. There's every once in a while there's a big pop, and it's because it's looking at the internal stuff and then suddenly generating points depending on what's being fed. So by me making the matrix, it's like, well, I don't care about the shape of the object. Here's just an independent matrix doing its own thing, which means these pieces become like static. We could even turn off the animation, this animation one, so that it's now static and we're now passing through. Let's not trap it inside the cube. Let's create double the matrices and make more spacing between them. Whoa, don't do that. More. So now there's a bunch of matrices, and if we make the turbulence strong enough, and let's get rid of some of this energy drain, then our object is more free to like drift. Let me give it more pressure. Our shape is more free to like drift through space, and you can see that it's going to be even cooler where these are not moving now, but we're just traveling through a cloud of Voronoi fracture, which, yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, just a shape represented by that. I mean, the more individual shapes, the more matrix count, the more subdivisions we'll have, and the more definition we'll get our object. Of course, it'll run slower, but you can now see. Let's turn off the extrude just so it runs quicker. I think it looks kind of nice there. So now you can see we get like a lot of definition of this, and we get this really nice cellular structure as it travels around. Yeah, you can see the cells grow and then shrink away as the shape moves. So very organic that we can travel through. But, you know, keeping in mind that we, you know, have the additional option of animating these individual pieces. Let's go faster on those so we can actually see it. Yeah, so now individual pieces are morphing around too, which makes it more abstract. Very alien looking. Any follow-ups to this specifically? Because we don't have too much time. Bihavana, thanks. I super appreciate it. And yeah, you should totally go tinker and try and change this and make it your own. I mean, there's so many different changes we could make to this basic rig where we can go back to the original Voronoi and offset the fragments more. So if I make these larger, now we'll get smaller chunks. I mean, I guess it goes less to the hollow outside, and the hollow outside is kind of like one of the appealing parts of this. Why don't we give it 0 offset? I guess, yeah, I guess you would want to give it a little thickness because those, they don't look too good when they start intersecting. Uh-oh. I just clicked invert and I think Cinema did not like it. I just saved so we don't lose anything, but might have just frozen. Oh, it woke up. Now what did invert do? I guess with this delete turned on, it's kind of dangerous. So, yeah, see, the invert is interesting because the, it gives us this outer skin. What's funny is that the delete, where the same selection tag would probably still be giving us this outside, And if we delete it, we end up with the same final visual result, which is funny. Clearly, it takes more time for it to calculate, but yeah, here's Capsules coming in and saving the day. I do like Capsules. I'm going to be doing a lot more with Capsules in the near future, so we might be able to spend more time focusing on it as we go, and I might know better techniques. For the most part, and when I say Capsules, I even just mean Neutron. Like, even here we reached for, well, there's good reasons for it, but here we reached for Espresso, but it's because Espresso works better with the object manager when it comes to a lot of node-based things. It kind of takes it into the world of nodes, and you're not in the object manager anymore. But it would be nice if we, end up doing, it's like, oh, we can solve this problem inside of the new nodes. Yeah, so just throwing that out there. I want to push this even further. Let's triple the amount. Yeah. Yeah, the more you make, I think it's going to look weird and cool. I wonder how well it could handle reconnecting them. Does it handle that? Maybe it can't. I don't think actually it does. If we say geometry, no. Sorting, detailing, connectors, no. No, it is geometry glue. But if we say cluster, I don't think it works. Yeah, it's too bad. It's an order of operations issue. Or, that doesn't seem good. Turn that off. I mean, it clearly did something, but well, maybe it can do it. Don't like the way it looks, though. I feel like the geometry glue is in contradiction to our offset fragments. Depends on the order of operation. But obviously not a good combination there. Maybe it is, and I was doing it wrong. This is how many clusters there are, but if we make the clusters smaller, maybe it could do a better job. Because there's a lot of clusters. I just wanted to see a more complex shape. Yeah, but I don't see the thickness, so I'm still not sure it's working. I think it might have turned off thickness, so we are seeing this thin-walled shell, which is a cool, weird shape. If you showed me this, I'd be like, but we lose the thickness. And we could kind of fake and get around it, but I don't think it'd be a good idea. You'd probably start getting intersecting geometries that pass through each other, and that's no good for anybody. Blurp, 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 blurp. Blurp, blurp. Neat. Okay, we're at exactly 4 o'clock, which is cool. Tobias, thank you very much. You can head on over and join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel, where you'll get live alerts for when I'm going live and conversations from people very similar, and including the people that are hanging out in these chats, helping each other, answering questions, asking questions, occasional challenges, and drawing, drawing topics come up that are all community run. So head on over to that if you feel like it. I put the link in YouTube, and Tobias put it in Twitch. I guess another thing to mention is if you, just to throw it out there because I haven't said it in a while, if you're on YouTube even, if you go over to Twitch, you can you can sign up for Twitch for free. And then you can follow me on Twitch, and you get an automatic email when I go live, which is really handy. Like any Twitch streamers that I follow, the few that I follow, getting that email is the main way I'm like, oh, they're streaming, I can go watch. But if you do that, if you have an Amazon Prime account, you get a free Amazon Prime gives you a free Twitch subscription every month. So you could subscribe to the Rocket Lasso Twitch channel, which will have essentially Amazon pay me a small amount of money, but you're already getting it for free, and then it would just be a way of supporting the channel and the tutorials and all that. So I would appreciate that if anybody has a chance, but no big deal if not. There's also the Patreon. If you go to Patreon, you're going to get access to the scene files because of the 21 video, and I'm trying to, there's a couple of things in the works over here. I'm a little behind getting some of the scene files uploaded, but I started yesterday catching up to them. But yeah, you get access to the scene files and early access to videos and whatnot. So anyway, that covers all the stuff. Thanks for the excellent questions today. It was very fun. And Thanks for the people who are suddenly subscribing on Twitch. I guess I should mention it every once in a while. It is super appreciated. So that's going to wrap this up, everybody. I will be back next week for another episode. I'm also going to be presenting for Maxon at SIGGRAPH. I have no idea what my presentation should be about. So I'll have to think about that. Well, yeah, what'll be new then? I don't know. But this will be the end. So thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out as always. And until next time, bye bye.